up on 61st and Yale yesterday. This was not done. This was a coordinated effort. It was not done haphazardly. I also have to thank the dispatchers and call takers at our 911 center that reacted as they were trained. Law enforcement across the nation is dealing with increased violence among people. This is yet another act of violence upon an American city. I will say that as a Tulsa police officer, we train, and we train. And we train for instances such as this. And I'm overwhelmed and proud of the men and women, all those that responded yesterday. Now I want to take some time and go over the timeline with you as we know it today. This information is fluid and can still change, but it is the most accurate information that we have at this point. Before I do that, let me go ahead and provide the names of the victims, and I will allow St. Francis to elaborate more on those victims. We have Dr. Preston Phillips, Dr. Stephanie Huson, Amanda Green, William Love, and our suspect, Michael Lewis. On May 19th, Michael Lewis went into the hospital for a back surgery. The performing physician was Dr. Preston Phillips. Mr. Lewis was released on 5/24, May the 24th. After release, Lewis called several times over several days, complaining of pain and wanted additional treatment. On May 31st, Dr. Phillips saw Mr. Lewis again for additional treatment. Yesterday, June the 1st, Lewis called Dr. Phillips' office again, complaining of back pain and wanting additional assistance. Now, we know through the help of our ATF and their gun tracing that at 2 p.m. on June the 1st, Mr. Lewis purchased a semi-automatic rifle from a local gun store. That semi-automatic rifle was an AR-15 style rifle. We know that Mr. Lewis purchased a semi-automatic handgun, a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol, on May the 29th from a local pawn shop. I now want to go into the shooting timeline. At 4:52 p.m. on June the 1st, a third party who was on a video chat off location with an on-location doctor called 911, saying the doctor told her to call 911, saying there has been a shooting. At 4:53 p.m., we received a 911 call about a shooter in a building. We then continued to receive multiple calls that were more specific on a shooter being on the second floor of the Natalie building on the campus of St. Francis Hospital. At 4:55 p.m., a person called and clarified the Natalie building as the scene of the shooting. The first Tulsa police officers arrived 1 minute later at 4:56 p.m. I want to give some context on the Natalie building. The Natalie building is a 5-story medical office building with numerous offices, rooms, hallways, and so forth. It is an exceedingly complex environment. A tactical situation for an officer to deal with is pretty complex. Officers entered the building on the first floor and made their way to the second floor based on the information they received. While on the second floor of the vast building, officers began yelling, "Tulsa police." This is something that we train to do. As officers were calling out Tulsa police and advancing towards a suspect location, they heard a gunshot. We believe that was the final gunshot, with the suspect taking his own life. The gunshot was at 4:58 p.m., approximately 39 seconds after the first officers entered the building. As officers started clearing the building, they came across a victim that was down in the exam room. Officers requested IMSA to the floor and continued searching for the suspect. This victim later died at the hospital. We found the suspect, and we rescued a female who was hiding under a desk at the suspect's foot. She was there when the suspect took his life. She did not appear to be injured. Officers rescued that victim who was hiding under a desk, but officers also located another deceased victim next to the shooting suspect. Officers continued to search the building for victims or additional suspects and came across another victim that was down in an open area near a nurse's station. At this point, officers began directing first responders, IMSA, and fire to those victims to render first aid. Again, this is something that we work cooperatively with, and we can go into what we call a hot environment with medical personnel and fire personnel and start rendering aid. In that same room there was the victim was at, officers also rescued an elderly female that was in the room. As officers continued to clear the building, they located Dr. Phillips deceased in an exam room. As officers continued to clear the building, they removed multiple witnesses and victims and escorted them from the building. As more officers arrived on scene, we began a methodical search of each floor of the 5-story structure, looking for witnesses and or victims. Thus far, we have recovered 30 .223 casings from the crime scene. We have also recovered 7 .40 caliber casings from the crime scene. We have also found a letter on the suspect which made it clear that he came in with the intent to kill Dr. Phillips and anyone who got in his way. He blamed Dr. Phillips for the ongoing pain following the surgery. At 5:24 p.m., we received a call from the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office, and that dispatcher told us a woman on the line whose name they did not have called saying that her husband had killed several people at Dr. Phillips' office. This would have been a half hour after the event occurred. We received 2 follow-up phone calls from the Cherokee County Sheriff's Office providing clarifying information. All of this information was after the fact. Once the scene was secure, the Tulsa Police Homicide and Crime Scene detectives began working the scene. They continued work until 3 a.m. this morning. We have now turned that scene back over to the hospital staff at St. Francis. I cannot emphasize enough that we train rigorously over and over and over again for not if, but when, because we have seen the violence that has taken place throughout the United States. And we would be naive not to think that that would not happen in our jurisdiction. So again, to the men and women of the Tulsa Police Department, Oklahoma Highway Patrol, all of the surrounding jurisdictions that descended upon the scene yesterday, I offer a heartfelt thanks, and I hope that each and every citizen that sees an officer today thanks an officer today, because this job is hard. It is difficult.
Thank you, Chief Franklin. I had an opportunity to walk through the clinic this morning, and I did that for two reasons. One of which so that I could see it for myself, more than just the lobby, which is where I was last night, but also so that I could do one thing, which is I represent over 10,000 people that make up the St. Francis health system, and I prayed over each of the areas where it was clear that someone had laid, including the perpetrator. And I last night sent a message to our staff, and I just asked them to do two things, one of which is to ask questions, because there are 1,000 questions that we're going to need to try to answer over the next couple of days, the next couple of weeks, probably next couple of months. But I also asked them to acknowledge that yesterday will change St. Francis, and it is up to us to not allow this horrible event, this situation, we can't allow that to make us want to turn our back on the reason that we're here. We were all called into this profession. Whether you're a physician or a caregiver or a support staff, we were all called into this profession to care for others and to care for our community. And while it's human nature to want to turn our backs right now, to want to walk away, we can't do that, and we won't do that. And so all I ask is for you to continue to support this organization and this community with your prayers, and know that St. Francis will come out of this even stronger still.
I'm struggling with the right things to say in this moment, and maybe that's because there's truly not any right thing to say. There's no words that can adequately describe the emotions that we have been feeling for the last 18 hours. I'm just going to speak from my heart this morning, so I hope you'll bear with me. First, to the families of our colleagues who were killed. Our hearts break for you. In addition to my administrative role as the Associate Chief Medical Officer, I'm a practicing emergency physician, and I had lunch with Dr. Phillips on Tuesday. We work really closely with our orthopedic team in the emergency department, and I know that all of my colleagues went into medicine to help people. This was their calling. Like Dr. Robertson said, this isn't just a career for them. We are supposed to be the ones that are caring for others during tragedies like this. To think that our caregivers were the victims is just incomprehensible to me. They died while serving others. They died in the line of duty. To the family of Mr. Love, our hearts break for you. I was in our emergency department last night, and I saw the trauma hall lined with our trauma team, our emergency department team, staff from the OR, our nurses, techs, respiratory therapists. They are trained just like our police departments are. We so wanted to be able to utilize our skills and training to save these precious lives. To the family of Mr. Love, I'm so sorry we couldn't save you. We are grieving with you. When I woke this morning, I really just wanted this to all be a bad dream, but this is the reality of our world right now. And today our world and our St. Francis family are devastated. We were just starting to process the grief and emotions that being on the front line of a pandemic had left with us, and now this tragedy. But I will reiterate what Cliff said. Our job is to help and heal. And we are here to do our job, even if it's with broken hearts. On behalf of our medical staff, I would like to thank our security team and all of the first responders who, without hesitation or fear, were on scene to do what needed to be done. In the emergency department, we have a special relationship with our first responders. We work very closely with our police department, with IMSA and our other EMS agencies. They are part of the team, and we work with them on a daily basis. So thank you for being here for us in our time of need. Thank you for being here when we needed you. Thank you for all you do to serve our community. We have all asked for prayers, and I will reiterate that. Whatever faith you subscribe to, and even if you don't subscribe to a faith, I will tell you that a prayer is just a solemn request for help. And I think we could all agree that our world needs a little bit of help right now. I want to leave you with the prayer that's been on my heart since last night. Lord, I see a world that's dying, wounded by the master of deceit, groping in the darkness, haunted by the years of past defeat. But then I see you standing near me, shining with compassion in your eyes. Jesus, shine down on us. Let your love shine through us in the night. Lord, we want to be your witness. You can take what's wrong and make it right. Thank you.
I'm G.T. Bynum, the mayor of Tulsa. I want to start, I think one of the really important takeaways from the very detailed breakdown that Chief Franklin provided us today is just how many agencies and entities have lent their expertise to this response. And I want to thank a number of people who are here today to show their support for this team at St. Francis. Our Congressman Kevin Hearn, thank you. Our Sheriff Vic Regalado, my colleagues from the Tulsa City Council, Councilor Lake and Councilor Patrick, Dodson, and Fowler, thank you. I've been contacted by the President's administration offering their support. Spoken with Governor Stitt. Governor wanted me to let the team here at St. Francis know that he has directed that all flags in Oklahoma are to be lowered to half staff for the next 4 nights in honor of each of these 4 victims. And I really want to thank the first responders yesterday. It is remarkable that we can be here 17 hours after this happened and hear that breakdown from Chief Franklin in such a detailed way of what happened. And that is not just because the Tulsa Police Department or the St. Francis security team was here all by themselves. It was because there were so many law enforcement experts and first responders here, not just responding to the immediate threat, though I will never forget, I spoke with an officer yesterday who's a seasoned veteran of the department, and he was one of the first people to get here. And he said, Mayor, it was like the beaches of Normandy out there. Everywhere I looked, to my left and my right, there were officers running towards that building, jumping over bushes. getting around anything in their way between them and that threat so that they could save people. That is the law enforcement community that we have here in Tulsa. But I'm also so mindful. I went over to the Family Reunification Center last night, and I saw experts there from the Tulsa County Sheriff's Office and the Tulsa Police Department and so many more, leadership from St. Francis, who were there bringing their expertise in assisting victims of trauma to provide the best care that they could in the immediate aftermath of a great tragedy. And I want to thank them as well. Our focus right now is on grieving. The shooter is dead. The threat that he brought to this campus, that has been ended yesterday. But the days ahead of us and the weeks ahead of us, it is so important for this community to show the team here at St. Francis how much we love you. And I want to thank all of you for coming to work today. Every day for years, including through the worst public health crisis we've ever faced as a city, you have put yourselves at risk to save the lives of people in this city. And I hope you know how much it is appreciated, how grateful this community is for you and your work and the risks that you take, and never even appreciating that you could have to deal with this kind of risk and this kind of premeditated violence. And yet you're still here, ready to save more lives today. This is a remarkable group of people that work at the St. Francis Health System. And so I want to ask my fellow Tulsans, in the days and weeks ahead, and that's the two things I've been asked the most in the last 17 hours. One, people wanting to know the details of what happened and why it happened. Well, I think thanks to the law enforcement collaborative effort, we have a very clear understanding of that at this point. But even more than that, people want to know what they can do to help. We now know who the victims are. There will be a time to memorialize them and to show our support for their families individually. But we also know that our community needs to rally around the heroes who work at the St. Francis Health System. I speak on this as the CEO of another large organization that went through great tragedy in the last few years. I can tell you that individually, on an individual basis, when you say, we would really like people to donate to a fund, or we want everybody in town on Friday to wear pink, when there's a memorial service, we want people there lined up outside. Any one of those individual things can sound like it's not enough to compensate for the loss, and it's not. But I can also tell you that when we went through the murder of Sergeant Johnson and the grievous injury to Officer Zarkishan, the way this community rallied around the men and women of the Tulsa Police Department, the way the people on this campus at St. Francis Health System rallied around the men and women of the police department, it meant so much to our officers and their families and everyone who loves them. The collective impact of this community that is a community of such great love, that collective impact made a profound difference to people who are grieving and going through loss. And so that's what I would ask of my fellow Tulsans. If you want to help, Participate in those ways that are going to come up in the days and weeks ahead, where you can show the people at St. Francis how much you love them and you support them, and that this community is here for them. I just want to say, lastly, on behalf of everyone in this community, it isn't enough to tell the team at St. Francis how much we love you and how grateful we are for you. There is nothing that we can say that will make this pain go away. But we will be here with you to walk with you through that process every step of the way. Have no doubt about that. Thank you.
Questions now? Yes, sir.
Yes, Chief, what you're telling us about your men and women and the other law enforcement agencies, just first of all, is very reassuring, particularly after what happened in Texas. So I just want to say that. Secondly, regarding these victims, you talked about the physician who this man was apparently angry at. Please tell us about the other three people. Why? It sounds like another physician and perhaps two civilians, who they were and why they were there.
The question is who the other victims were and why they were there. They were there for medical service. The doctor was there providing care. They stood in the way. They stood in the way, and Lewis got them down.
So two patients and another physician who worked in the same office?
So there were two physicians, yes. There was a receptionist and there was a patient.
Any other questions?
Yeah, can we just get the spelling of first and last name of everyone?
We'll send that afterward. Yes, Kevin?
Chief, could you go through the police department's policy for dealing with an active shooter like this? You instruct your officers to go in no matter what. How do you handle something like this? What are they instructed to do?
When that call goes out, the first officers that arrive confirm that there is an active shooter in progress. We then have an activation that occurs through our 911 system that alerts every Tulsa police officer on duty and off duty. It alerts our special response team. It alerts our special operations team. It alerts all of our surrounding areas. Everyone responds en masse. We have all trained together. We've all worked together. We know each other's tendencies through that work. So when we get that call, we are going to disregard any safety measures that we might have for ourselves, and we are going to go in the building to deal with the threat. Our philosophy is we will stop the threat, and we will do that by any means necessary. That's exactly what the mindset of these officers were that responded on the scene yesterday, and they performed heroically, in my opinion. And I cannot thank enough the response not only from our locals, but also from the FBI, the United States Marshals Service, the ATF. All of them responded en masse. And if you were out at the scene, you saw every shoulder patch, every patch on the back of the vest from every different jurisdiction surrounding Tulsa. That's how we train. We train together. We respond together. We work with St. Francis Security, and have the director of security for St. Francis is a retired Tulsa police major. So we are always in constant contact and in sync with one another. This was a massive building, which is, again, what we train on. Large buildings, large structures create obstacles for our officers between reinforced doors, between cavernous hallways. The shots echoed in the building. So we train to enter the building. If shots are being fired, we are to move rapidly towards those shots. If shots are not being fired, We are going to be more methodical in our approach as we look for signs, and that's what these officers did. When they first entered the building, they saw broken glass. They saw shell casings. They were following those shell casings around and began yelling, "Tulsa police, Tulsa police." And it was then that they heard that final gunshot. They rapidly moved to the area where they heard the final gunshot, but again, it's a cavernous building, and so those shots echoed, and they eventually found the shooter.
Next question. No, right here.
Chief, thank you. Blaine Alexander with NBC News.
And we've been watching a news conference from Tulsa, Oklahoma, following the mass shooting there yesterday. Police confirmed it was a targeted attack, and the shooter was a recent patient at the St. Francis Medical Facility. He shot the doctor who had performed back surgery on him in May and whom he blamed for the pain he was experiencing post-surgery. 2 doctors and 2 others died in this attack.
The gunman purchased an AR-15 rifle from a local store, and multiple weapons were found on the scene. He took his own life as officers advanced. We have a lot more on this throughout the day. For now, let's take a break. You're streaming CBS News.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It's gonna be big!
The metaverse, the virtual world that's become a cryptocurrency casino.
It's like buying property on Mars.
Do they get an actual picture of this? No, it's a digital copy. Why would they pay for that?
Making millionaires almost overnight.
We made more than $1 million in crypto last year.
I have no idea how much.